Welcome to Screen Time with today's Communiqué. Of course, I am Kenya. We are in a new year, and I am excited to talk to you guys about a new documentary that will be premiering right here in Arkansas on January 19th, all about the Elaine Massacre. And so we are thrilled and excited to have the film's director, producer, Mr. Michael Wilson, joining us to talk about all things Elaine Massacre and what went into the creative process of putting together the documentary. So, welcome, Mr. Wilson.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So, before we jump in to talk about the documentary, please share with our audience just a little bit about you and your career path.
Okay, well, I grew up in Arkansas. I grew up in Little Rock and went to, Little Rock Central and Hendrix after that, and then went off to the West Coast and studied art, and then the East Coast and studied art more, and then back to the West Coast. And I was there for about, 25 years, and then came back to Arkansas working on the film. Felt like I needed to be closer to finish it up, to wrap it up. And the situation sort of presented itself as a possibility. So I came back to Arkansas and I've been here since 2020 and have been teaching at Central since September. So um, that's the sort of thumbnail sketch of my trajectory, I guess.
So, you mentioned that you majored in art. And
Yes.
so you've completed this documentary about the Elaine Massacre. Talk to us a little bit about how the project even came to be.
Yeah, well, I was back in Arkansas and the aughts and saw that a book had been published about an event I'd never seen before, heard about, and it was Griff Stockleys' Blood in Their Eyes, and it was part of a series of books that I was going to review for a publication out in Los Angeles, and I just got so uh, immersed in the book that I forgot about the review, and that never happened. But it just stayed with me, and I thought about it in terms of radical organizing and how, when I was here, it really wasn't uh, a thing, and there was some, sort of civil rights organizing going on, but most of it was backward looking, like the celebration of sort of like triumph over racism at Central High, which is, obviously a, not a
Right.
serious claim, but that's kind of how it was presented. Whereas this hidden event, which was much more impactful to the people of the Delta and Arkansas in general than the Central High event, materially speaking. Psychologically speaking, I guess the media event that the Central High integration clash created was, a lot more sensational.
Right.
But the the nature of the Elaine massacre was that after it happened, everyone in Delta was told to be quiet. Everyone was told to literally shut up and go back to work. There were broadsides put on, posters put up all over the county telling people those words.
Right.
Be quiet, go back to work, don't talk, stay out of trouble. Everything's fine.
Right.
So, it's kind of no wonder that with, literal threats and the looming specter of this event, in the past, that it became a place where, people feared to talk about race relations, feared to talk about power dynamics. This place was called the American Congo by the NAACP in the 1920s. And if you know
Wow.
anything about the history of the Congo, you know that it wasn't just a colonial operation. It was one of the most brutal, repressive, torturous, murderous regimes, that has ever existed. The Belgian Congo is just renowned for its brutal torture and murderous manner. And so to make that comparison is pretty eye-opening, but it makes a lot of sense when you
Mhm.
think about the kinds of problems that they're facing and how they're so similar.
And you mentioned at the beginning, a few moments ago, about how it's a slow death. And
Yeah.
can you compare and contrast the massacre
Hmm.
with what is currently happening, the slow death, as you call
Right.
it? How do they compare, contrast, in your opinion?
Well, I think the murder rate is the worst, if not one of the worst, in the country. So it's like it's in the top uh, of per capita murders, in the country. So it's still a bloody mess, and that kind of crime exists in regions of extreme poverty, and that's what you face there. There are no jobs. They've mechanized all of the agriculture, which is not sustainable. Yeah.
So when you think back, it took you 7 years to
Hmm.
do the documentary.
Yeah.
Are there one or two things that I know that a lot came of that, but are there one or two things that um that you learned about the whole experience and the massacre and documenting the history that just kind of blew your mind? I mean, without giving away the whole story or what we were going to
Sure.
learn, one or two things that just you were just like, really, this happened?
Yeah. uh well, I was talking to a woman who is just very, very reticent to talk in the beginning. And then after we had talked for a while, she started telling me about having seen ghosts when she was a child in Victorian garb and or turn of the century garb. And this was like very anachronistic like clothing. And so she was like taken aback as a child, and she went up and talked to her grandmother. Uh, and it was located on a spot that a lot of people have identified as a possible mass grave.
Oh,
And
wow.
he told her grandmother about it, and she looked at her and said, "Honey, don't you know what happened here?"
Oh,
As if
wow.
this was something that, you know, um, was either bubbling up from the unconscious, or, like a shared kind of trauma that was unconsciously affecting her. Like, I'm not
Mm,
saying that she literally saw a ghost, but the fact that it happens and people talk about it like this,
right.
that influenced my approach to the film. Like,
With an experience as traumatic as that is, I'm sure that those who wrote history back then did not want the complete story to come out.
that's
And they
right.
only wanted to just kind of brush over it, and just do a brief mention and move on. But
That's right.
you mentioned the term trauma, how traumatic the events were, and I wonder what your thoughts are about the descendants of the massacre victims and just the city itself. Do you see or have you observed the transfer of that trauma to the descendants, to the residents of Elaine currently?
Oh,
Did you?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, for one thing, you know, they still call, some people still call the black side of Elaine the quarters,
Mm,
um, as in slave quarters. And so, that's a holdover from the 19th century. And so, I mean, that's something that's kind of hasn't I think that's the case in a lot of towns in the South, but there's a very strict divide along
Mhm.
Main Street. Main Street divides the town into, and the South side is predominantly white and the North side's predominantly black.
You have some pretty significant folks participating in the documentary.
Right.
Michelle Duster, who is Ida B. Wells's granddaughter, great granddaughter, and folks like Judge Wendell Griffin and Joshua Asante. And I was just wondering how they played a part, those key figures, as well as Dr. Sharice Jones Branch. You mentioned her as well, the renowned historian, professor of history at ASU in Jonesboro. So how did those key figures come to be a part in the documentary?
So, well, a friend of mine recommended, actually, two friends of mine recommended Joshua when I
Mhm.
was looking for someone to do, primary sound recording. Everyone thought that he would be the perfect person for the job. And then, you know, I think that Wendell was down in Elaine quite a bit during the time that I was filming. So I got to know him, and then we did, an interview. I've recorded him, uh, you know, talking down there, preaching down there, in front of a truth commission. Joshua and I have become pretty close and have worked, very closely on the film, even in post. And so um, we both kind of learned, that we had more of a connection down there than we thought, uh,
Mm,
especially him.
mm,
He reconnected with some relatives who live in Elaine. So, Dr. Branch Jones was an obvious person to talk to because she's doing, some pretty groundbreaking work on the, role of women in the Delta,
mhm.
Black women specifically, and the fact that this has been a kind of ignored part of the history, um, really made it, kind of a no-brainer to talk to her.
What do you hope that viewers will um, walk away with? What message do you hope that they will walk away with?
I hope that people come away understanding the gravity of Elaine as an event, that still has repercussions, very material repercussions, not just psychological, up to this very day. And the legacy needs to be transformed from one of lack and uh, the legacy needs to turn toward the future. I think that the legacy of Elaine can become uh, exemplary of the way that, this sort of industrial agriculture needs to transform. The place is really dying because of current practices, systemic neglect, the structural kind of rape of the land, the killing of the citizens because of the chemicals used in the process of farming these big industrial fields. And the place should be, I think that people should understand that the land should be redistributed and that, help could come in the form of, you know, putting Elaine out there as a model for sustainability.
Mhm.
Let's not just bring them to the sort of unsustainable status quo. Let's elevate that area as a fertile kind of, you know, hub for a new form of society, new social relations, new ways of relating to each other. And I think that I know that the Black population is ready for that, and I think a lot of the white population is too. So hopefully that will happen.
Well, we will definitely keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best. So I appreciate your time. Look forward to seeing the documentary next week and fellowshipping with everyone there and participating in the Q&A. So with that, that's a wrap.
Okay.